Chapter 1. The Threat. You have no idea what you've started. The voice on the other end of the line was low, almost amused, but laced with something sharp, something undeniably dangerous. Amelia Vargas tightened her grip on her phone, her pulse hammering against her ribs. "Who is this? How did you get my number?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to sound composed. "You think this is about a slap?" The caller exhaled, the sound crackling through the receiver like static before a storm. "It was never just about you. It was never just about him. But now you're in the middle of something bigger than you can imagine." A pause, a deliberate one, designed to amplify the growing sense of dread that was constricting Amelia's chest. "And people who don't know when to walk away," the voice continued, its tone hardening, "don't get to walk at all." The line went dead. Amelia stared at her phone, her mind racing. Who was that? What did they mean? A slap? David Sterling? What had she gotten herself into? Chapter 2. La Lumière. The air in La Lumière was thick with the scent of truffle oil and privilege. The crystal chandeliers, imported from Murano, cast a constellation of light over the city's elite, their facets reflecting the smug faces of Chicago's wealthiest. The murmur of hushed conversations, the clinking of silverware, and the soft strains of a live jazz band created a symphony of wealth and exclusivity. Amelia Vargas moved like a phantom among them, her black dress blending seamlessly into the background. Her tray, laden with champagne flutes and delicate canapes, served as a shield against the judging eyes of the patrons. Her smile, practiced and unwavering, was a mask, concealing the exhaustion and worry that gnawed at her from within. At 25, Amelia was a young woman stretched thin, her life a constant juggling act of long hours, mounting bills, and unwavering responsibility. Double shifts at the upscale restaurant fueled her family's survival, keeping a roof over their heads and food on the table. Her father's sudden cancer diagnosis had devoured their savings, leaving them teetering on the brink of financial ruin. Her mother's frail hands trembled too much to work, leaving Amelia as the sole provider. Every clink of crystal glasses was a stark reminder of the bills piling up on her kitchen counter, the overdue hospital call she dodged, the precious hours of sleep she'd sacrificed. Tonight, though, fate had other plans in store for her. Tonight, a single impulsive act would catapult her into a world of power, corruption, and danger, a world she never knew existed. Chapter 3. Table 12. David Sterling sat at Table 12, his presence dominating the corner booth. A mid-40s tech billionaire whose empire, Sterling Industries, loomed over the Chicago skyline. His tailored suit, impeccably cut and obscenely expensive, gleamed as sharply as his cold gray eyes. His watch, a Patek Philippe that could have paid off her family's mortgage, glinted under the chandelier light. His reputation, however, was far darker than his polished appearance. He was known as ruthless, untouchable, a man who crushed his rivals without mercy and savored the wreckage. Whispers followed him like shadows, whispers of stolen innovations, silenced whistleblowers, and lives shattered under his relentless ambition. Amelia approached the table with a bottle of Chateau Margaux, her hands steady despite the fact that she had been on her feet for 18 hours straight. She poured the wine with practiced grace, careful not to spill a single drop. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Sterling?" she asked, her voice polite and professional. David Sterling barely glanced at her. He was too busy talking on his phone, his voice curt and dismissive. "Just bring the check," he said, without breaking eye contact with his phone. Amelia nodded and retreated to the kitchen, her shoulders aching with fatigue. She longed to collapse into a chair, to close her eyes for just a moment, but she knew she couldn't. There were still hours to go before her shift ended. As she turned to leave, exhaustion betrayed her. The bread plate on the table slid an inch, a trivial error barely noticeable. But David Sterling noticed. Chapter 4. The Slap. "You incompetent fool." David Sterling's voice sliced through the dining room's hushed hum like a shard of glass. Before Amelia could stammer an apology, before she could even process what was happening. His hand lashed out, striking her cheek with a crack that reverberated off the walls. The sound was sharp, brutal, shocking. Gasps rippled through the room as diners froze, forks dangling midair, eyes wide with horrified fascination. The music stopped. The conversation ceased. All eyes were on table 12. David Sterling leaned back in his seat, smirking, his fingers flexing as if he'd just swatted a bothersome fly. "Know your place," he said, his voice loud enough for all to hear. Humiliation burned hotter than the sting on her face, but Amelia swallowed it, forcing herself to maintain her composure. She mumbled an apology and retreated to the kitchen, the whispers of the elite patrons stinging her like a swarm of bees. "Did you see that? Unbelievable. Who does he think he is?" Amelia reached the relative sanctuary of the kitchen, her legs trembling. She leaned against the counter, pressing her palm to her cheek, willing the tears away. "Not here. Not now," she whispered to herself. She didn't know that a college student at table 9, a young woman with a keen eye and a smartphone, had caught the entire incident on video. Chapter 5, Going Viral. By dawn, the video was a wildfire, spreading like digital lightning across the internet. Hashtag Justice for Amelia was trending on X, as millions watched David Sterling's casual cruelty in looping, agonizing horror. The hashtag Sterling abuse quickly followed, unearthing whispers of his past, stolen innovations, silenced whistleblowers, lives shattered under his relentless heel. The internet, fueled by righteous anger and a thirst for justice, was turning against him. David Sterling, lounging in his penthouse overlooking the city, scoffed at the uproar. He dismissed it as a temporary inconvenience, a minor PR problem that his team would easily handle. His PR team, scrambling to contain the damage, issued a hollow apology, a carefully worded statement that described his actions as a regrettable lapse in judgment. It was gasoline on the blaze. Chapter 6, The Note. That night, in her one-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of the tracks, Amelia found a crumpled note in her apron pocket. It was written in messy, hurried handwriting. "He's more than what you think. If you want the truth, reach out to me." Below the message was a phone number. Amelia's heart thudded in her chest. Who had written the note? What did they know? Fear warred with a burning desire for justice. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over her phone. She knew this could be a trap, that getting involved could put her in even more danger. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she had a responsibility to do something. Fury, raw and unyielding, won out. She texted the number, her fingers trembling. "Who is this?" Hours later, as she was trying to fall asleep, her phone rang. The number was unknown. She answered it, her voice barely a whisper. "Hello." A voice answered, low and edged with urgency. "Pier 17. Midnight tomorrow. Come alone." The line went dead again. Amelia stared at her phone, her mind racing. Pier 17 was a desolate stretch of waterfront, known for its crime and its isolation. Why did they want to meet her there? Despite her fear, she knew she had to go. She had to find out what was really going on. Chapter 7, Pier 17. Pier 17 stretched into the darkness, a skeletal structure of rotting wood and rusted metal. The ocean lapped at its edges, a restless confession of secrets and sins. The air was thick with the smell of salt, decay, and the faint, lingering scent of diesel fuel. Amelia, her heart pounding in her chest, walked cautiously along the pier, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. A figure emerged from the gloom, tall and wiry, with a scar curling down his neck like a warning sign. He moved with a quiet confidence, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a practiced alertness. "You're Amelia, right?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. She nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. "David Sterling isn't just an abuser," he said, his voice hard. He pressed a USB drive in her hand. "He's a predator. That's evidence. Documents, audio proof. He'll kill to bury it." Amelia's grip tightened on the USB drive. This was bigger than she ever imagined. "You're the key to ending him." The man continued. Amelia's head swam. Why her? Because you're the crack in his armor, he said, his eyes meeting hers. The world sees you now. They're listening. He turned and disappeared back into the shadows, leaving Amelia alone on the pier, clutching the USB drive and the weight of a terrifying secret. Chapter 8. The USB. Sleep eluded her that night. Amelia stayed up all night, poring over the contents of the USB drive. It unveiled a nightmare, a meticulously documented record of David Sterling's corruption and abuse. Financial records of embezzlement, showing how he had siphoned off millions of dollars from his company. Recordings of David Sterling threatening rivals, his voice dripping with malice. Photos of bruised faces, victims of his private enforcers. One file stood out, a folder labeled Evelyn Carter. Evelyn Carter was a former VP at Sterling Industries who had disappeared after vowing to expose him. Handwritten notes hinted at her fate: silenced, problem solved, location unknown. Amelia's stomach twisted with nausea and fear. This wasn't just about a slap anymore. This was about something much darker, something much more dangerous. Chapter 9. Evelyn Carter. The USB drive contained handwritten notes that mentioned Evelyn Carter being moved to a small town near the coast. It was a long shot, but Amelia felt compelled to investigate. She had to know what happened to Evelyn. She booked a room at a local motel and started her search the next morning. Evelyn was living under the name Ellen Crane and was deeply traumatized. She explained how she had been fired, blacklisted, and threatened after she tried to expose Sterling's illegal activities. Her resolve strengthened. Amelia vowed to bring David Sterling to justice, not just for herself, but for Evelyn and all the other victims he had hurt. Chapter 10. Allies. After leaving Evelyn, Amelia knew she couldn't do this alone. She needed help. People she could trust to fight against Sterling's power and influence. She decided to reach out to Karen Voss, a journalist with a reputation for dismantling giants. Karen was known for her investigative skills and her unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth, no matter how dangerous. She also contacted Isaac Levy, a lawyer whose disdain for corporate greed matched her own. Isaac was a brilliant legal mind with a track record of taking on powerful corporations and winning. She told him her story, showing them the evidence she had gathered from the USB drive. They listened intently, their expressions growing increasingly grim as she revealed the extent of David Sterling's corruption and abuse. Both agreed to help her. Karen began digging into Sterling's past, uncovering more evidence of his illegal activities and his abuse of power. Isaac started building a legal case against him, preparing to file lawsuits on behalf of Amelia and other victims. Chapter 11. The burner phone. Amelia knew she was being watched. She could feel the eyes on her, the subtle surveillance, the constant sense of being followed. She remembered the burner phone that the man at Pier 17 had given her. She took it out of its hiding place and turned it on. A text message appeared on the screen. It was a single word: "They're watching." She immediately turned off her regular phone and inserted her SIM card into the burner phone. She knew she had to be careful, that every move she made was being scrutinized. She met Ben again, this time at a hole-in-the-wall diner that smelled of burnt coffee and desperation. He slid her the burner phone. "Use this. They're watching you." She nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Who are you to him?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at her. Ben hesitated, his scar catching the dim light. "I was his fixer, cleaned up his messes." "Not anymore. Not anymore." She didn't trust him fully. His eyes held too many shadows, too much pain. But she took the phone. She needed all the help she could get. Chapter 12. The letter. As the foundation of her case grew stronger, Amelia's hope wavered again as she found a letter from a lawyer who was hired by a woman who claimed to be his daughter, abandoned after the divorce. As it turned out, the letter was forged, and they decided to use the information in the original message. A tiny map pointed to a park near the warehouse. David's pulse raced. Days later, a fire gutted the storage unit. "Arson," the cops said. The gold was safe, moved earlier, but the message was clear. George's past wasn't done haunting them. Chapter 13. The turning of the tide. With Evelyn Carter's testimony, Karen's investigative reporting and Isaac's legal expertise, the tide began to turn against David Sterling. The media seized on the story, turning him into a pariah. Investors panicked, sending Sterling Industries stock plummeting. The board of directors, facing mounting pressure, forced him to resign. Lawsuits were filed, exposing his corruption and abuse for the world to see. Chapter 14. A New Life. Years passed. David Sterling was brought to justice, his empire crumbled, and his reputation forever tarnished. Amelia Vargas, once a struggling waitress, became a symbol of courage and resilience, a voice for the voiceless. She used her platform to advocate for victims of abuse and to fight against corporate greed. She worked tirelessly to create a world where power and privilege could not shield the guilty from justice. She never forgot the man who helped her, even though she never saw him again. And sometimes, when she felt overwhelmed by the challenges she faced, she would think back to that night on Pier 17, to the man with the scar, and she would remember his words. "You're the crack in his armor. The world sees you now. They're listening." It was enough to remind her that she was not alone, and that even the smallest act of kindness could spark a revolution.